Hey everybody, welcome back. We're about to start our second webinar. I am just letting everyone in the waiting room back in. Colleen and Roberto are here. Okay, so I will just give a quick little This is our second webinar on system sciences at NSF. We have Colleen Strawhacker and Roberto Delgado here ready to tell us about system sciences. And I just want to let you know for Zoom, your mute button is in the bottom left. This is a very important button. Either you use it or I will use it for you, and then you won't be able to unmute yourself sometimes. So make sure you stay on mute and unmute yourself when you want to speak. I also invite you to turn on your webcams. There'll be a discussion section at the end. If you turn on your webcams, it's almost like we're in a real meeting. We can see each other and get to know each other face to face. While Colleen and Roberto are speaking about the program, I recommend you don't orally contribute your questions. Just put them in the chat box, which is on the bottom center of the Zoom window. You might have to move your mouse down there to make it appear. And then one more thing I want to tell you is the speaker view button on the top right. You can toggle between gallery view, which is seeing everybody in the room, or speaker view, which is seeing just the speaker. And so as I said just a minute ago, this is a webinar hosted by IARPC Collaborations. We bring all of the federal agencies that are working on research in the Arctic together to coordinate, communicate, and collaborate through implementing our Arctic Research Plan. And we also have a community, that's the IARPC, and we also have a community called IARPC Collaborations, which is open to anybody who wishes to contribute. We have 9 collaboration teams that meet monthly there about various Arctic research topics, and we welcome all of you to join. When you join, you'll be automatically notified about future program manager talks from other IARPC agencies. A lot of our program managers post their funding opportunities there. And in addition, we welcome anybody who's a part of the community to share what they're working on, whether it's publications, upcoming conferences, just thoughts or ideas, or if you're just looking for somebody to collaborate. The website is a great place to post that and connect with your research community. So I'm going to put a link in the chat so you know where to request an account. And now I will turn it over to Colleen and Roberto.
Thanks, Jessica. Sorry, I was trying to get my PowerPoint set up just to kind of reiterate. I'll be kind of talking, and Roberto and I will be talking. Hopefully, we'll try to keep it to about a half hour or so. If you have any questions while we're talking, please feel free to drop them in the chat box. I'll try my best to monitor it, but I kind of get in the zone when I present PowerPoints. But then if you want to have a quick question, that's fine. Otherwise, I'll just ask you to mute, and then we'll open it up for discussion and questions at the end of the PowerPoint. So let me just share this really quick. Let's see. And then hopefully you can all see that. And let me just make sure that I can see the chat box and monitor that. Great. I also wanted to highlight some of the other NSF people online. Sorry, all of my toggles are below my camera, so it's a little awkward. Okay, so I just also want to highlight some of the other people from the National Science Foundation that are online too. So we have Simon Stevenson, who is the Arctic Section Head, is online. We have Zhujing Davis and Cynthia Suchman from the Arctic Natural Sciences Program. Obviously, Roberto from the Arctic Observing Network Program will be talking to you a little bit about that in a few slides. And then I have my partner on the Arctic System Sciences Program, Greg Anderson, online as well. So we're all here to, and I also, Kate Ruck from our logistics program is here too. So if you have any questions at all, we're all here to answer and hopefully have a good discussion about this. So I'll go ahead and get started. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Colleen Strawhacker. I started as a program officer at NSF back in August, so I'm still relatively new, learning the ropes, but I'm currently leading the Arctic Social Sciences Program, and like I said, I'm co-leading the Arctic System Sciences Program with Greg Anderson. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to provide an overview of all the things going on that could fund kind of systems-related research in the Arctic at NSF, because it's not just the ARCS program. There are a lot of different opportunities that are related to each other. So I just kind of wanted to put them out there and start to kind of start a conversation around, where your proposal might best fit. So some of you probably already know this information, but I wanted to kind of situate the Arctic System Sciences program within the wider NSF Arctic section. So I wanted to give an overview of kind of what exists within the Arctic section and then kind of some budget numbers too, so you know where everything stands. So we have 4 programs within the NSF Arctic section right now. We have the Arctic Natural Sciences program, which focuses on processes that are important to understanding the Arctic. We have the Arctic Observing Network, which is designed to make field observations to detect and understand Arctic system change and to generate data that are intended for wider use. And Roberto will talk more about that program in a few slides. We just had a webinar on the Arctic Social Sciences program, which will be posted online shortly. So if you're interested in Arctic social sciences, feel free to take a look at that or reach out to me. Obviously focused on Arctic social sciences, past and present, anything that the Social, Behavioral, and Economics Directorate here at NSF funds, we're willing to review. But also given the nature of Arctic science, we have a special interest in the wide range of Indigenous scholarship as well. And then, of course, we'll be talking about the Arctic System Sciences program, which advances understanding of the Arctic as a coupled system and how it interacts with the Earth system, including socioecological systems. And I'll talk more about that in a couple of slides, too. So some of the current program officers, I highlighted them at the beginning, but again, we have Cynthia Suchman and Zhujing Davis for Arctic Natural Sciences, Roberto Delgado, the Arctic Observing Network. Myself and Roberto are working on Arctic Social Sciences, and then Greg and I with the ARCS program. We also have a research support and logistics program here led by Pat Haggerty, Jen Mercer, and Frank Rack. I'll talk a little bit about the RSL program in the next slide, but I wanted to highlight their names just in case you wanted to reach out to them. And of course, if you're interested in polar education awards and funding opportunities, Lisa Rome would be the person you would talk to for that. So I know many Arctic System Sciences PIs and scientists take advantage of the RSL program, but I just wanted to put it out there and put it on your radar because those of you might be new to the Arctic, new to working in the Arctic, maybe new to thinking about how you can take advantage of the services that the RSL program can provide. I wanted to put this on here just to kind of give you a broad overview because it's a really nice service that the Arctic section can provide to PIs to make sure that you can get your work done efficiently and safely. So like I said, the RSL program provides you with resources to make sure that you can get to your research sites, make sure that you get there safely and you have access to equipment that you might not otherwise have access to under your prime award. So I put links down at the bottom here. The ARCUS website has these reports that are displayed on the right here. And then the bottom link is the NSF program description website for the research support and logistics program. The RSL program can coordinate things like ship time for you, get you to remote field locations. We recently provided a project with sleeping bags and tents when a trip came up and they needed them and did not have enough money in their budget to really allocate that to make sure that people could stay warm on their field site. So as you're putting together your project and your proposal, definitely keep the RSL program in mind. They're a great resource. All of the information for the RSL program is also available in the solicitation, which I'll also talk about in a few slides. So here's a rough overview of the Arctic section budget from 2003 to 2017. You can see in the light gray here, the research support and logistics is getting a lot of money. It's expensive to get people around and keep people safe in the Arctic, so we invest pretty heavily in that. Dark gray is the Arctic Natural Sciences. This is the blue is what you're all here for, the Arctic System Sciences program. Yellow, the Arctic Observing Network. Green, Arctic Social Sciences. And then you can see how the Arctic section has been investing more in research and policy activities. So things like supporting participation in the International Arctic Science Committee or IATS or initiatives like SEARCH. I also wanted to highlight that the Arctic budget has been sitting around $100 million. I took out some of the kind of smaller chunks here to kind of make this a little cleaner, but I also wanted to highlight that many of you have probably heard about the Navigating the New Arctic initiative, the big idea. And so that is actually on top of the core Arctic program budget. So that kind of puts us way up near about $130 million or so. So that's actually separate and additional from what our Arctic programs are funding. So I just wanted to kind of give you that idea too. I know there was some confusion as to whether it was included in the Arctic program budget or not. No, it's actually an additional $30 million starting in this year, FY19, and is planned to continue for the next 5 years. Okay, my first question, good. Will this PowerPoint presentation be available after the webinar? Yes, it will. I'll post it on the IARPIC website, and I know Jessica is also recording, so she'll post the recordings too, so you can get kind of what we're saying and the questions as well. So I also wanted to kind of break down the budget numbers a little bit more to give you an idea, kind of the actual numbers associated with the graph that I just showed you. And the change over time. So I just kind of picked these graphs at random to give you kind of an idea of these numbers. In 2009, you can see here 41% going to research, support, and logistics, about 20% of the budget going to Arctic system sciences, almost 15% going to Arctic natural science, 12 to AON, and then, about almost 4% to Arctic social sciences. In 2017, we have a little bit of a change, more money going to research, support, and logistics. Arctic natural sciences and Arctic system sciences have decreased a little bit, but still quite a bit of money being invested in those programs. Arctic Observing Network holding steady at 12%, and Arctic social sciences approaching 8% or so. And again, all of these numbers are available online. So if you kind of want to dig into the nitty gritty of other years, what was going on in IPY, for example, that big spike that you saw in 2009, you can dig around the NSF Arctic website and those are available. So I'll talk a little bit about the Arctic System Science Program, but I don't want to kind of get too down in the weeds in it because I would rather hear the thoughts of the people online, but just so we're all on the same page and give a starting point for people where people can start to chat about these things a little bit more. So again, I wanted to pull out the ARC's budget for the last couple of years too, so it's not kind of lost in the wider Arctic section budget. But you can see here in 2013, about $16 million was invested in ARCs. We're holding steady a little bit over about 12 to 13 million in 2017. I haven't added in the 2018 budget numbers yet. And for those of you waiting for proposal decisions, we're still waiting for our final budgets for FY19. So please stay patient with us. We're still catching up on the lapse of appropriations that happened back in January. So for those of you who plan on submitting a proposal to the Arctic System Sciences Program, this will be kind of your guiding document. This is the link to our solicitation that will cover opportunities available within the Arctic System Sciences Program, the Arctic Social Sciences Program, Arctic Observing Network, and Arctic Natural Sciences Program. And it will outline the various different funding mechanisms that we have. Research coordination networks, Arctic Social Sciences has doctoral dissertation improvement grants, workshops, eagers, rapids, research networking activities. All of that stuff is outlined in this link. If you don't want to write it down right now, Google it. It's usually the first thing that comes up, but this will be kind of your guiding document for how to submit a proposal to these programs. Not surprisingly, when you're talking about studying an Arctic system or a system of the Arctic, most of these projects are going to be multidisciplinary. I dug up some data that was collected by my predecessor, Diane McKnight, in the ARCS program, and she found out that the average project has 2 major disciplines and 3 subdisciplines associated with each project. So that's really multidisciplinary. Again, not a requirement of an ARCS project like it is for other kind of programs at NSF for it to be multidisciplinary. But I could imagine that if you're studying some aspect of the Arctic system, that being multidisciplinary in some way would be beneficial to doing really good science. So I wanted to highlight some of the recent awards coming out of ARCS this fiscal year. These include things like research grants, so the kind of senior big research grants that are being submitted to ARCS. We're open to hearing if you have ideas for eagers or rapids as a mechanism to fund your work through ARCS. We have funded workshops and supplements to active awards. So I've put some of the awards that we've pushed out recently. We have a workshop award to Karen Ashton for the Synaptic Arctic Survey. I think I've seen a number of advertisements go out from that looking for participation. So if you're interested in participating in that, definitely reach out to Karen. ARCS has, not surprisingly, invested quite a bit in Mosaic. My next slide is on Mosaic, but an award to Matthew Shoup on the coordination office for Mosaic. Obviously, if you're thinking about studying a wider Arctic system, Mosaic is a good way to do it. And another Mosaic project. So I'll just kind of cover briefly what Mosaic is for those of you who don't know. This is a really ambitious project to essentially freeze an icebreaker in the middle of the Arctic sea ice for a year, and to do a wide range of different types of measurements based on what people propose to study. So obviously this is a type of project that is very interesting to the Arctic System Sciences program at NSF, because you're taking a lot of these measurements, you're trying to understand the wider Arctic system with a number of different things going on. So this fiscal year, the ARCS program has invested quite a bit in the Mosaic program. I should also mention that we're about to add this statement to the program description within the next couple of days or so. So I just wanted to highlight this really quick, and I'll read it for those of you who might not have access to the PowerPoint right now. But ARCS also accepts proposals that address research on socio-ecological systems of the Arctic, including projects in Arctic resilience, vulnerability, and human ecodynamics. So if you have a social science driving question, social science partners who really want to understand socio-ecological systems, ARCS is absolutely open to receiving those proposals and reviewing them. Types of proposals that might inspire this might have come from the CNH program or the Coupled Natural Human Systems program at NSF. And I'll talk a little bit about navigating the new Arctic as well, which very much has this kind of convergent socio-ecological aspect to it too. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is we're really thinking a lot about how we want to build a community for ARCS researchers. So any ideas that you may have, maybe we can talk about this when we're done talking. I would really love to hear if you think this is a good idea, something that we should invest in. Should we invest in connecting people who have been funded by the ARCS program, or thinking about how we can do kind of more interesting projects? I would love to hear from you. The last webinar I talked about the Arctic Social Sciences program. We had the Arctic Social Sciences program had a really innovative initiative called the Arctic Horizons program. You can look more into that at arctichorizons.org. And that was really kind of groundbreaking for the Arctic Social Sciences community to kind of come together and talk to each other about the interesting research that was going on, and it has actually spun off a huge amount of really innovative research projects. So if you think that would be a good idea for ARCS, or maybe we start slower, I would love to hear from you on that. But Greg and I have been kind of tossing ideas around for what that means for the ARCS research community. And Roberto just put the Arctic Horizons link on the chat box, so thank you for that. And with that, I'll actually hand it off to you, Roberto, to talk a little bit about the Arctic Observing Network and Belmont Forum.
All right, thank you, Colleen. So I appreciate having an opportunity to say a little something about Arctic Observing Network within this system science focus, as I did earlier with the social science program overview as well. For those of you who don't know me, again, my name is Roberto Delgado. I'm the program director for the Arctic Observing Network program at the Office of Polar Programs, Section for Arctic Sciences, and I began my current position in August of last year. At a really exciting time, I think, for NSF and Arctic research. As Colleen and I both joined the foundation, we were finishing the solicitation for navigating the new Arctic and diving into our respective programs. So a lot of neat work. What I want to focus on in just a few minutes basically is, describe another funding opportunity, or another program rather, in which system scientists can also submit proposals to. I think there can be considerable overlap or mutual goals achieved through our respective programs. With the next slide, please, Colleen. So what I want to do is just provide an overview in sort of thinking how system science can also be a component of Arctic observing. If you read through the current Arctic research opportunity solicitations, you'll note that so the different programs, the Arctic science programs are described there. AON is described or having criteria that focuses on supporting field observation to detect and understand Arctic system change, as well as addressing major drivers and or impacts of system change, but also very importantly for the broader research community, generating data that are intended for wider use. And the slide that's currently on the WebEx basically highlighted a few projects that have been funded previously or that are active now through the AON program or co-funded with AON and others. And since we did a back-to-back series of webinars here highlighting both social sciences and system sciences, when I think about system sciences and looking at how it's described in our solicitation about coupled systems, I always think of coupling either the natural and the physical sciences with the social component. And so the few projects I've highlighted here include, for example, a number of collaborative projects. One is ALOCA, which is the Exchange for Local Observations and Knowledge of the Arctic, in which Colleen was a PI before she joined us here at NSF. And this award focuses on optimizing data management support for community-based research and observations, contributing to Arctic science. So a nice broad project. I also highlight those awards through AON that have community-based monitoring components associated with it. So for example, I've highlighted here the Yukon River Basin Indigenous Observation Network. This is the first award that was issued a number of years ago, which focused on uniting traditional ecological knowledge and Western science to address and understand water resources in the Arctic. And I'm very happy to announce that we actually just this week recently awarded the next iteration of the ION, the Indigenous Observation Network, that focuses on the impacts of environmental change on the Yukon and Kuskokwim watersheds. And the PI is Ida Mutter from the Yukon River Intertribal Watershed Council. Tying into system sciences and the overall Navigating the New Arctic initiative as well, big idea rather, during, I think, as a result of the Dear Colleague letter from the previous fiscal year, well, the AON program was led, managing a research coordination network, or RCN, titled Eyes North, which focuses on community-based observing initiatives in the Arctic and beyond. Really a broader sort of framework development and trying to integrate, to a certain extent, a system science approach as well. And the PI there is Dr. Lil Elisa from the University of Idaho. And the last one I want to highlight, which also was sort of a direct result or response to the NNA Dear Colleague letter from last year, is a project led by Chris Hart from the University of Alaska Fairbanks, titled Fresh Eyes on Ice, Connecting Arctic Communities through a revitalized and modernized freshwater ice observation network. So the reason that I sort of bring these to the fore is, again, because we're talking about really coupled systems in the sense of understanding environmental change as well as the integration of community-based monitoring approaches. And I'll highlight, Chris sent me a link actually last night about basically, I'll highlight of the project, a description of the project, and I'll put this in the chat. Hopefully everyone can take a look at this, which focuses on how the project links community members with scientists to monitor Alaska's river and lake ice. So I want everyone on the WebEx here to think about different ways in which your science can fit within the broader programs of Arctic sciences, and not necessarily be so limited to thinking only about a system science approach or a natural science approach. But if there is this transdisciplinary nature, which by definition I think is really relevant, and has these additional Arctic observing components, then there can be opportunities for co-review, co-funding even, where you have much sort of broader yield of the work. So I'll stop with that on AON and then move on to the Belmont Forum. Colleen, if I can have the next slide, please. So the Belmont Forum is a really interesting international collective of research of funding agencies that are designed to really promote international partnerships and interdisciplinarity. So there was one call, or the first call on Arctic research, which focused on observing about five years ago, when I first came to NSF as a science policy fellow, and I helped the then Arctic Observing Network director with some of the language and developing that. So it's nice to be back up for the second round. Colleen, if I can have the next slide, please. So the current Belmont Forum call focuses more on resilience in rapidly changing Arctic systems. And as I said, it's an interesting sort of mechanism because it really draws from investments across the international landscape. Many different agencies from different countries are committed to providing funds to support interdisciplinary research, with one of the primary aims being to bring together researchers across the globe to develop and obviously implement proposals from integrated teams to address key areas of Arctic resilience, understanding, and action. And what is really important, or a key feature of the Belmont Forum and the different calls, is that the research teams, often referred to as consortia, need to include partners from at least 3 of the participating countries. So for the U.S., the National Science Foundation is one of the 2 participating agencies. BOEM, the Bureau for Ocean Energy Management, is the other. And together, basically, we've provided set aside amount of support to promote and foster these types of collaborations, international collaborations. The other important thing of the Belmont Forum call is that the project should include, or must include actually, collaborations between natural and social sciences, as well as showing some clear links to end users and stakeholders. And so having really an applied outcome if possible, which actually is similar to our NNA big idea as well. So examples could be results leading to management decisions or development decisions, for example. And it's really another opportunity, again, for the scientific community to build these relationships across international boundaries as well as disciplinary areas. So there is a website, which is the application portal for the Belmont Forum. It's bfgo.org. Where you can find more details about the call as well as the application process. I'll add that since NSF is one of the participating agencies for the U.S., that I am the national point of contact for the U.S. So I am happy to answer questions here if you have them, or separately afterwards via email or phone call. And just also highlight that the deadline for submission is June 14th, so not too far away. If you don't already have some international partnerships or cross-disciplinary relationships, maybe a little bit more challenging to you, but I still think about there are some other opportunities there as well. There's one currently on disaster risk management, and one on climate and health, which some of you may have an interest in, or at least may know some colleagues who are willing to seek those types of opportunities. So I'll end my remarks there and send it back to Colleen to finish out our session here.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Roberto, for providing that information. That was really helpful. So I'll finish up with Navigating the New Arctic. Many of you have heard about Navigating the New Arctic. If not submitted to the program, we had our last submission deadline date was March 4th. So we don't have any active awards yet for FY19, but we did have 2 Dear Colleague letters from the previous couple of years in which NSF kind of explored this idea of a Navigating the New Arctic big ideas, which I'll talk about. But again, I thought it would be important to talk about navigating the new Arctic because absolutely, if you're a systems scientist or you study Arctic systems or systems of the Arctic, navigating the new Arctic might also be a really good place for your research, depending on how you want to structure your project and your team. So I wanted to kind of point out this is the NSF website for Navigating the New Arctic. This website, again, if you Google Navigating the New Arctic NSF, this one will probably come up. This one has all the information about current and active solicitations, previously funded awards under Navigating the New Arctic. We have kind of webinars on there from when we were doing outreach to PIs for the previous submission. We'll put schedules if we decide to hold office hours for PIs. We did that after the government reopened. And so go on there if you're interested in learning more about navigating the Arctic and seeing what is going on with navigating. And so I just kind of wanted to put a couple of slides up here. You can see here for navigating some of the key components. You can see on the right this kind of tri-Venn diagram here with the social system, the built environment, and natural environment. And the thing that was really different about navigating the new Arctic was that it really required this very much convergent approach to understanding the new Arctic. So one of the requirements for a proposal going into NNA was kind of touching on at least 2 of these circles, if not 3. The requirement was to have too. So if you had a project that discussed the intersection between social sciences and engineering or the built environment, that would absolutely be appropriate for navigating the new Arctic. So some of the very broad goals for NNA are to innovate for Arctic observing, advance research and modeling, to co-produce knowledge, build and enable partnerships, and to advance STEM education and workforce. And like I said, our current solicitation for FY19 closed on March 4th, but NNA is seen as a 5-year program, so definitely keep an eye out for future opportunities to engage in NNA. And I would also say definitely keep an eye out for the awards coming out of the program. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of science will be funded and to try to engage in those new and growing research communities. Like I said, we don't have any FY19 awards yet, but I did want to quickly highlight some of the awards that were distributed during FY17 and FY18. These were funded under a Dear Colleague letter that was kind of exploring convergence research at NSF through navigating the new Arctic. And so from the titles, you can see that these are really convergent research projects. So an award to Ming Zhao, coordinate a transdisciplinary research network to identify challenges of and solutions to permafrost coastal erosion and its socio-ecological impacts in the Arctic. We have an award to Thomas Ravens, anchor the Arctic Network for Coastal Community Hazards, Observations, and Integrated Research. And one to Marie Lowe, emergency response in the Arctic, investments for global capabilities and local benefits. So you can see that the really convergence, multidisciplinary aspects to understand the new Arctic, where NNA is really focusing its resources on. So with that, I just wanted to kind of put up the question. I posed a question earlier about kind of building an ARCS research community. I want to kind of hear what your vision is for the Arctic System Science program at NSF. We have 2 new program officers in that have been here for, you know, less than a year now. And so we can really start to innovate on what ARCS can and should be focusing on. And so with that, I will put our contact information up here. There's mine, Roberto's, and my partner in ARCS, Greg, if you want to reach out to us via email. But at this, I'll just kind of stop talking and take any questions and kind of tap into the other NSF people online. And so I do see a question already in the chat box. So should NSF proposals for the Arctic include work in Alaska, that is the US Arctic? For example, I've been doing some work on reindeer and Svalbard. It's not a requirement that anything takes place in Alaska. We know that the Arctic is a very international space. So we fund work all the time in Greenland and Svalbard and Russia. If you plan to send sub-awards to foreign organizations, that's where things get a little complicated. So if you have questions around that, we can talk about that, but your research can be kind of circumpolar. And Jessica, I don't know if you want to kind of do your IARPIC kind of tech overview again too.
Yeah, I was just going to do that. So everybody, I encourage you to turn on your webcams now so we can all see each other face to face. It's almost like a real meeting. And you can also click on gallery view in the top right and you can see everybody in the room. It's a really cool feature of Zoom. And the last thing I'll say is that if you don't already have an account on the IARPIC Collaborations website, you should request one. Colleen and Roberto both lead teams there. Roberto manages the Environmental Intelligence Collaboration team, and Colleen leads the Diversity and Inclusion and the Coastal Resilience team. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So you can meet with them once a month at their monthly meetings in addition to now. And in the IARPIC Collaborations member space, there's functionality to share your work, your resources, your publications, your upcoming events with our entire community of 2,000 researchers. So I will put the link to that in the chat and go ahead with your.
Thanks, Jessica.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm John Martin. I'm at the University of Florida. Can you just describe a little bit more about what you mean by discipline and subdiscipline for the Arctic System Science?
Yeah.
We're actually working on a proposal right now. We're trying to decide between Arctic System Science and Arctic Natural Sciences. And we've talked to Cynthia Sushman about it, and Greg, actually. And don't have clarity. So I'm going to mute myself again if you don't mind. Just
I was on the fence about including that slide because I wasn't really sure where Diane came up with her data, but I figured I would include it to make a point that systems level research is often interdisciplinary. But maybe, we have this question a lot about the kind of fuzzy boundary between all of our programs. It's not just ANS and ARCS, it's Navigating the New Arctic, the Belmont Forum, Arctic Social Sciences. So I would what we've been telling PIs, and maybe Cynthia and Greg might want to step in there, is to just really think about the proposal that makes sense for your research and don't worry too much about that. But maybe Cynthia and Greg, do you want to chime in on this question since you've actually talked about this project too?
Who first, Cynthia?
You go first.
Okay. So yeah, this is a really common question, and it's one that, because ANS and ARCS sort of have this fuzzy overlap, we deal with quite a bit, actually. The best thing for us is when folks come forward with an idea to put together kind of a one-pager or at most 2 pages, and then that gives us the opportunity to look at that, talk to our colleagues, Cynthia and I and Colleen and Roberto sit down and chat, and look at it and see where does it fit. Well, does it have a strong fit, better one place or the other? But ultimately, you should write your proposal in the way that you think works best for your science. And if in the end you submit it to, I'm just going to pick ARCS, and we look at it and we think that what you've written probably would be more competitive in the natural sciences, we have the opportunity to go and talk to Cynthia about it and also talk to you about it and say, this might work better there. What do you want us to do? We can transfer it. We could co-review it. We can review it where it stands. There's a variety of options. In terms of discipline and subdiscipline, boy, that's one of those things that's sort of in the eye of the beholder in some ways. I would say the difference mostly between ARCS and ANS, between Arctic System Science and Arctic Natural Sciences, really is the focus about systems or a system or the Arctic system, or is it a focus about a process, a particular thing that you want to understand the process in more detail? If it's about a system or about how processes interact together in a system, then system science makes more sense. If it's about the depth of a specific process, understanding something, and it can be a big, complicated process, then that would tend towards, at least from my perspective, over to ANS. But it's a fuzzy thing, and we have this conversation a lot. Cynthia?
Yeah, so we have this conversation, I'd say, multiple times a week. So I agree with everything that both Greg and Colleen have said about this. One of the things since moving over to Arctic Sciences from the Oceanography division that I've noticed that I actually think is the strength of our structure is how easy it is to do interdisciplinary work in any of our programs. So I would be hard pressed to find, well, probably not, but I'd say more often than not in ANS, we have interdisciplinary projects that we're supporting. So that is not by itself the definition of ARCS versus ANS. As Greg said, is it a process-based study? Are we trying to understand the function of one aspect of the system? And that can reach into, say, a model that can try to understand a portion of the system and can try to be integrating processes. And that's where things get a little tricky, and it's better for us to have a look at a project summary. And we do look at a lot of project summaries, and a lot of advice I give to people after looking at a summary of their ideas is to do your best when you contact us to write what your specific research objectives are, because that's what we're going to be looking at for clues as to whether it's really a process-based study versus trying to get at the system or a pan-Arctic approach. So hopefully that makes sense. And I think this question came up in our last discussion last hour, and it is also important to read the solicitation and to the degree that you can make sure it fits the solicitation. So it is useful if you're concerned about which program is better to write to a program that's often in your best interest. So we will do our best to give you advice from your project description. That said, we can transfer in between the programs if we look at something and we think it really is more of an ARCS than an ANS project. And we can do that and let you know that that's what's happened. Does anyone have anything to add to that? Did I say anything anyone disagrees with from NSF?
I do have one thing to add just to give some clarity on the data. So that data actually came from, I think, the 2016 Committee of Visitors that happens every 4 years for all of these programs. And it's one of the portfolio questions that is asked specifically that we have to analyze data for across all the different programs. And then the question is, does the program portfolio include inter and multidisciplinary projects? And I think when that had happened, we had sat down as a group and had defined the disciplines and subdisciplines and then evaluated each award or proposal for that Committee of Visitors. So that's where it comes from.
Thanks, Kate. That's really helpful. But I think, yeah, I think what we're getting at is that, you know, it's often not an easy question to answer. The boundary is really quite fuzzy, and that it does take kind of some conversation with the program officers to make sure that your science is the science that is strongest for you, the science that you want to do, and then trying to figure out the best fit for it. So please don't be afraid to reach out to us and ask.
I have a question for Colleen. You mentioned that there is some interest on getting feedback on whether it would be of value to get ARCS researchers together, which I think, yeah, I think at one point, didn't that used to happen with some sort of ARCIS role in helping organize that? I think that is important because one, I think a lot of ARCS researchers may not be communicating with each other, and so there might be some opportunities to kind of grow cross collaborations. And two, would a venue like that be open to inviting, say, Indigenous community participation so that they can help define some of their community focus interests and researchers aren't left guessing what they feel would be of value to communities? Would something like that be open to, say, you know, community members that aren't part of an ARC proposal?
Yeah, thanks so much for bringing that up. So yeah, from what I understand, there used to be kind of PI meetings that were organized by ARCIS for ARCS PIs that happened way before my time. And so we've been kind of thinking about what would be the best way to get people together. And I'm kind of hesitant about the PI meetings because, like you said, it leaves a lot of people out, especially if we're thinking about kind of new venues for where ARC should be kind of contributing and putting resources into and things like that. So I do think having these kind of open, you're interested in Arctic system sciences type research would be a really good idea. And I think ARCIS as a venue, it would be a good option for that too. So thanks for bringing that up, because I would love to have Indigenous organizations and individuals there to kind of put their kind of opinion in on where these things should be going. Are there any other questions at all?
I have a question. I'm Becky Hewitt. I'm here at Northern Arizona University, and I have a question about workshop support and sort of best practices for integrating people with expertise and those that hold traditional ecological knowledge observations. So I'm working with Michelle Mack, and we're trying to organize a circumarctic network of below ground ecological observations, and we have a keen interest in integrating terrestrial ecological knowledge observations within that context. And I think she's spoken with some program officers at OPP looking for workshop support for this endeavor, but we're just sort of wondering and looking for a little bit more clarity on best practices there. At this point in time, we've reached out to colleagues that work in the Canadian Arctic and in Alaska, and they've pointed us both towards science consortiums where we might be able to find the right people to work with. But I just want to clarify whether it's best to sort of have people on board in terms of co-organizing a workshop where they have expertise in social sciences, since we as natural scientists don't have this expertise, and we also haven't built relationships in these communities that we're interested in working with in the future.
Sure. Thanks for that question. That is something that comes up a lot in all of our programs. And so I'll just kind of overview the kind of workshops funding available through our solicitation, and then talk a little bit more about your question about engaging Indigenous knowledge holders. So yeah, we fund workshops within the Arctic section. If your budget is under $50,000, it doesn't go out for review. If it's between $50,000 and $100,000, we'll do a review on it. So these are the things that you really want to talk to your program officer about, because if we don't take it out, especially specifically for review, we kind of want to know and we'll give you feedback on what we'd be expecting from a workshop proposal. That being said, I think it's excellent that you want to include Indigenous knowledge holders in your workshop. And what I would say, both from kind of my experience in working with Indigenous peoples and organizations, and also as a social scientist, to include them at the earliest possible aspect of your proposal. It can be really damaging to kind of say, okay, we have a proposal funded now, and we said we wanted to bring Indigenous people in, and you didn't work with them, and they might not have the same goals or same input in what this workshop would be kind of funding. So I would say work with them at the earliest outset, both social scientists and Indigenous peoples, and to get their kind of feedback on what the theme of the meeting should be, what the agenda for the meeting should be. I would say from an NSF program officer perspective, I would definitely want to see letters of collaboration from them. They've agreed to either they're a co-PI, they've agreed to be a co-PI or senior personnel, or they've agreed to come to your meeting. I would definitely want to see that that they've agreed to participate, because often we'll get proposals that kind of have a throwaway line like, oh, we'll engage Indigenous knowledge holders, but they actually haven't engaged any Indigenous organizations or people at all. And so it's not convincing to the program officers or the reviewers that will actually happen. I hope that starts to answer your question, or did you have any kind of follow-up at all?
Not right now. Yeah, that does provide a lot of help. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that the idea that Olivia brought up into kind of making sure that we have a really diverse group at any future ARCS community meetings, and having kind of Indigenous peoples and organizations at the table there will help to kind of increase interaction and make sure that you have the context necessary to truly better engage those people in your scientific projects.
Colleen, could I chime in a little bit?
Yeah, please. Thanks, Greg.
Kind of all very well said, and agree 100%. One, I guess I would sort of generalize it, that advice of, if you are going to work with Indigenous knowledge holders, for that matter, if you're going to work with somebody who isn't, and there isn't a letter of support or a letter of collaboration, which is really what it is, a letter of collaboration, the proposal, both we as POs and the reviewers will pick up on it very quickly. And that's true if it's a conference proposal, it's true if it's a regular research proposal. That's a key thing.
That's a really good point. Thanks, Greg.
Can I ask a question? And it's based on this workshop. I've heard a question asked, and I haven't been able to answer it. When working with Indigenous knowledge holders, sometimes there's a desire to try to pre-meet with them and engage them very, very early in the process, and maybe visit some villages and get to know what the issues are and whether or not it will work. And it's pre-proposal phase. Is there any funding available for that kind of engagement?
So actually, the Arctic Social Sciences Program just funded a workshop proposal to do just that. The PI was really wanted to shore up his connections. He had some beginning connections beforehand with some community members up in Canada, but wanted to take the opportunity to hold a workshop to get their input on a research project that he was thinking, and have them co-design the research project and the research questions. I would have to talk to Greg and sit on specific problems and whether that would be appropriate for the Arctic System Sciences program. So the Arctic Social Sciences Program has actually funded those situations before, if they're kind of a social science related question. We have Navigating the New Arctic this year had planning grants, which I think, I could imagine people proposing to something like that, in which, you have these group of researchers who really want to engage Indigenous organizations, but it takes a lot of money and time to do that. It's not cheap to get around the Arctic. So I have a feeling, Track 2 planning grants would be a good opportunity for that. Anyone else from NSF have any other ideas or input on that at all? I guess I covered it all then.
This is a case where I'm thinking I don't have an answer right off the top of my head, and so the silence is me skimming through a couple of relevant documents at high speed, and that's always dangerous. So yeah, I'll agree with Colleen. We should just sit down and talk a little more about this among ourselves.
Yeah. Any other questions? Cool. I think I solved everyone's problems then, right? Well, I guess with that, I'll just kind of say thank you so much both to the scientists and the PIs that called in, and to my NSF colleagues for calling in and helping to answer questions. I found this really valuable from an NSF side, and I hope you found it valuable from a PI side of things. And like I said, please don't be afraid to reach out if you have any questions. Does anybody else have any other closing thoughts at all? Awesome. Well, thanks again, and have a good rest of your morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you may be. I know we have kind of an international / circumpolar contingent right now. So thanks again. And this will be posted online later. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for participating.
Thanks, everyone. The video will be available on our YouTube channel and also on irpiccollaborations.org.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you.